Today I'm going to talk about Eloquent scope classes. This is, the term scope classes is something that I made up. I don't know if there's an official name for it, so if you go Googling this, you probably won't find much, but I do provide some resources at the very end of this to help you find your way. But this is a technique that we've used on a number of different projects to kind of solve a common technical problem that we have with organizing our Laravel models. So first, a little bit about me. As I've already said, I'm Jordan Hoff. I am a senior software engineer here at LinkedIn. I am a dad to two beautiful little girls. Baseball is a really important thing in my life. I run a baseball league, play in it. I have since I was in T-ball. And then outside of that and the family, I'm a serial hobbyist. So I get into just about anything I can get my hands on. So I've been into Arduinos and 3D printing and drones and anything that I can take apart and modify and ultimately break and then walk away from is something that appeals to me. So okay, so in this scenario, for this talk, we are theoretically creating a backend for a veterinary hospital. So we have a client, they've contacted us, they've said this is what we want. We're going to have users, which are our employees, and they're going to log into this thing, right? We're going to have a table about customers, has customer data. We're going to keep track of all the animals, all the different pets. And then along the way, we'll have invoices and appointments and other stuff, right? Cool. So this whole subject was inspired by this tweet that came out a couple of weeks ago. So
thought that would get more yucks.
I was kind of hoping. So kind of the classic example used in learning about class inheritance and stuff is you have a class dog that extends the animal. All right. Cool. So like I mentioned, we have an employees table, we have a customers table, we have an animals table. Employees is going to be tied directly to authentication, right? So if anyone's ever done authentication in Laravel, it works straight out of the box. It's, really slick. But once you actually start diving into it, it can get a little complex, right? And in particular, if you try and have two different or multiple tables or multiple authentication methods, it starts to get really hairy. Then your client contacts you and says, well, no, now we want to do something a little bit more, right? So they have an old pamphlet site on WordPress or something, and they say, all right, we want you to rebuild our external site and give our customers the ability to log in. And we want them to be able to see the invoices, schedule appointments, the information about their animals, whatever, update their name whenever they decide to change it. Cool. So now what do we do, right? So we've built this app and we have all of our we have all of our employees and they're tied to authentication, but now we want to get customers involved with authentication, right? So that is where Eloquent scope classes come in. So instead of having employees and customers as two separate things in the database, instead we're going to take a different approach where we just have a users table, right? And this users table basically represents any living person, and they can be either an employee or a customer, but they're one and the same from the database's perspective. And then we just differentiate them based on some value in that table. So in our users table, we have employees and we have customers. So an Eloquent scope class is basically a base model, in this case user, and we use object inheritance to extend that base model into two different classes, right? So we have an employee class and a customer class. Both of those extend user, and then user kind of defines the stuff that's common for both of those. And what we'll get out of this is that each scope class, customer and employee, will behave as if it was a separate model in the database, just like you made two separate tables. They'll behave separately from Laravel's perspective. You can treat them as if they were two different things, but under the hood, they'll use one database table. They'll use this users table, and you can do kind of some neat stuff with it. So just kind of as a brief overview, you'll have your user class here at the top, and it'll extend to authenticatable. This is what you get out of the box with Laravel. You get a users.php, right? That's the only model that you get. And authenticatable, this Illuminate Foundation auth user just extends model. So it's the same Eloquent model as you would normally use. It just kind of makes it so that you can log in, right? Adds a couple things under the hood. So basically, for the purposes of this talk, it's a model. And then we have our employee and our customer, and they both extend that base user model. Okay, so that's cool. And in regular PHP land, we could probably start running with this. But we do have to consider some things about Laravel. So Eloquent in this case is smart, and in a lot of cases it's too smart. So they do the Eloquent library, or the Eloquent model does a lot of really smart things under the hood to try and guess what you're doing. Gives you a lot of really sane defaults out of the box, and that's kind of what makes Laravel great, right? But then when you're starting to do some more advanced stuff like this, it almost becomes something that you have to fight against. So in this case, when you new up a customer, in this case, it's going to assume that your table is customers. Or if you try and create an employee, it's going to assume your table is employees, right?
Is there a way around that snake case?
Yes. Yeah. So you can actually explicitly define what your table name is. So the table property on a model is null by default, and Laravel says if the table is not defined, then go guess what it is, right? And that's what you're normally doing under the hood. So the first thing we need to do is on our user class, we define our table as users, right? So by explicitly defining the table as users, that's also inherited by both the employee and the customer classes, right? So now customer is not going to go guess and assume it's the customer's table. It's going to say, I'm hard-coded to users. Let's use the users table, right? Same thing. Oh, I thought I had another slide there. Okay, so that covers that case. And then, so if we jump back into this, and I should have added another slide here, but the next thing that we need to do is make employee and customer only work for those types of users, right? So the way that we do that is by adding a global scope to each one of those classes, and we'll override a boot method, and we'll get it. This will make a little bit more sense once we actually jump into code. So this is what this looks like. So class employee, which extends our user. We have to define, we're redefining this already exists on the model class, on the Laravel, on the Eloquent model. So we're just kind of overriding it, and the very first thing you have to do is say parent boot. So that's just saying go run the boot method that's defined higher up in the parent class. And then we're going to define our global scope. And a global scope, for those that aren't aware, so on an Eloquent model, you can do query scopes, or so you can run queries, right? So you can say, employee where name is whatever, like some of the stuff that Pete was doing in his talk. So by adding a global scope, this just means that this gets applied on every single query, no matter what. So unless you explicitly opt out of it. So it's kind of like a default query. So in this case, we're saying for every employee, it is where the type field in the database is equal to employee. So that's kind of like our differentiator. And then likewise for customer, we do the exact same thing where we say a customer is defined by where the type is equal to customer. So if we were to pull up Tinker, and I have some seed data in my example app that we'll jump into, but just to kind of show you what that looks like, just by defining the table on our base user and setting these two scopes, you have the ability to say, now app customer first gets me this ID number 11, which is of type customer. And then app employee first gets me from the same database, or from the same table, these are both coming out of that users table, we now get ID 1, which is of type employee. Okay, so from here, I am going to back out and jump over to a terminal. So I have this repository here. Let me actually just open it up real quick. Again, this is available out on the Laravel Omaha organization under scope classes if you guys want to go out and check it out. But I'll just kind of go through how all of this works, right? So if we start with the user class here. So I had kind of cut down in the original presentation just for brevity and for clarity to be able to explain how all of this is working. But this is basically what comes out of the box with Laravel. You get, it uses the notifiable trait, you get the fillable array, and you get some hidden stuff here. But otherwise, the only thing that we've done is we've added this protected table equals user, and that's it, right? We have our customer and our employer. So same thing here, customer, we have our boot method that we've added our global scope to. And then I've also added a relationship here. So I have an animals class, and I've done some database seeding and stuff. So we have a relationship there. Cool. So an animal is just a pretty basic model that has name, type, age, and then there's a relationship from animal to both an employee. So like maybe a doctor. A doctor is associated with a particular pet, and then that pet belongs to a particular customer, right? And so by using customer ID and employee ID, we can actually use the Laravel defaults. It's going to auto guess those names for us in order to get those relationships. So let's see here. If we go into Tinker, and yeah, so if we pull up the first employee, sorry, I haven't seeded my database yet. Sorry. Okay, so the migrate fresh command will basically kill all of your existing database. It'll run all your migrations, and then it has this optional command that you can do to run your database seeders. And so that'll just kind of like reset everything and go back to square one. So we do that, and if we look quickly at our seeder, so we have under database seeds and then database seeder, we are creating 3 employees in the database, and then we are creating 20 customers. We create those, and then for each customer, we create either between 1 and 3 animals and associate that with them, as well as a random employee in the database. So we kind of just stand all this stuff up and tie it all together, right? Okay, so now we go back into Tinker, and we'll clear. So now if we go and get the first employee, we get Jalen. If we go get the first customer. We have max at ID 4. If we do, you can still interact with users. So if I do user first, I should get Jalen, which happens to be an employee, right? But if we do, I don't think I can do random on that. Right, so if we do a random user, we might get a customer. We'll probably mostly get customers because they're kind of 10 to 1. Just kind of hoping they would get an employee in here.
No, but keep trying.
All right. Not my lucky day. But you get the point. So if we do count, so we have 23 users in the database. If we get a count on employees, oops. We have 3 employees and 20 customers. Cool. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of an Eloquent scope class. So if you're ever in a situation, and it doesn't have to be specifically something that you would use for like authenticatable. I think that's probably the use case we've used it the most for. So you might have a user that has an admin flag, right? So then you have an admin scope class, and then you have regular users. You also don't need to do 2 like we have in this case. As you can see here, you can still interact with users as regular users. So you can just kind of have this like super class of a specific subset of users. It's also really good for organizing code. So if you imagine, if we just kept everything in user, right, you have some methods are related to employees, you have some methods are related to customers, and they're just kind of all jumbled together in this big class. This is a really nice way to organize that, right? So you put the customer-specific stuff in one, the employee-specific stuff in the other, and then anything that's shared between those you can keep in user. There is one pretty notable gotcha with this, and that is with relationships. So in this case, a relationship on either customer or employee, you can pretty much define as you normally would. But again, Laravel or Eloquent is doing a lot of intelligent guessing underneath the hood. So if we were to say we had some public forums or something like that, and both employees and customers could comment on those forums, and we had this comments relationship, you would have to explicitly define as the second, third, and fourth arguments the proper table name and the proper foreign keys to tell Eloquent where to go find that stuff, right? Because otherwise, if you say, give me the first employee's comments, it's not going to know how to do that because it's going to go out and it's going to look at employee underscore user instead of comment underscore user. But beyond that, that's pretty much the only catch is with those relationships. Otherwise, it seems to work pretty well. It's fairly, there's no performance degradation or anything like that by using this method. So I think we're starting this. It's just something that we've started over the past couple months, and we're starting to see a lot of benefit out of it. You can find more information. So like I said, we've been doing this a couple months. In researching this, I found, so Caleb, if anyone doesn't know about Caleb, follow him on Twitter. He's super interesting. He works for Titan Co. I think he just joined there recently within the past month or so. But he wrote this blog post back in December about this exact topic. So this literally covers exactly everything what I've talked about. And they actually have a solution for the gotcha where you can add a trait to your parent or to your child models that says has a parent model. and it'll intelligently fix all of this stuff so that you can just use your relationships like you normally do. However, it's there is a performance hit to that magic. So if you're doing something on a large scale, you would be far better off to be explicit about those relationships. And again, if you are looking for the code for this, you can find it on our organization.